Welcome back to your favorite science news show, Africa Science Focus. I'm Michael Kaloki. Thanks for joining us. How much do you know about your body's nervous system? That's the command center that controls our movement, automatic responses, and our thoughts and memories. Beginning in our brains, our nervous systems are spread throughout our entire bodies, and they are studied by neuroscientists and neurosurgeons. As Johannesburg's Busamed Modderfontein Hospital hums and buzzes around her, we find out more about this fascinating field of study from leading neurosurgeon Soseka Mfundisi. Dr. Mfundisi is only the third black female neurosurgeon in South Africa and the second black woman to be admitted as a fellow of the country's College of Neurosurgeons. Halima Athumani has the story.
Many people, when they think of it and they hear of it, they think, oh wow, what a complex and scary and potentially deadly thing, depending on, whether you're hearing about it, you're a medical student or you are a high school student who wants to do medicine and maybe do neurosurgery, or you're a patient who needs neurosurgical intervention. And I would like us to move away from that. It is a very lovely specialty. It is nice and complex, but fun, very fun once you understand it. And also for the patient themselves, it has improved and advanced in such ways that it is no longer a deadly intervention for conditions. One of the things that I always find difficult is when you have delay in decision making by families when there's a need for intervention out of fear, and you realize that it's out of fear of what needs to be done, opening the head. And that unfortunate delay can then, of course, worsen the potential outcomes. So I just want, would like the just general community to start trusting that this specialty is there and it is advanced to make things successful. And of course, if there are people, are lawmakers and policymakers in the continent, to actually just invest in it. Invest in it and you're going to save lots of money, because the impairment that can result from not investing in neurosurgery services is very expensive to any government and to any nation and to any family, as a matter of fact. So let's let's continue to invest in it and continue to advance it and continue to actually make sure that it has a very wide reach for our communities to benefit from it.
Neurosurgeons are doctors that help with medical conditions related to the brain, spine, and other parts of the body's nervous system. Dr. Mfundisi manages brain and spinal emergencies, and she's an expert in performing brain surgeries for trauma and injuries, cancer, and other conditions.
And I think it's important to have Africans in general in the neurosciences, because the topic on its own and the subjects on its own is a very complex, but it's also not very easily translated into our context of living. When a person comes to you with a neurological complaint, they usually have many perceptions, because most of the time, things are happening in the brain or happening within the spinal cord. People can't see them, and they present in a very maybe strange fashion, in that they may cause like referred pain, or they will present with a difficulty in speaking or difficulty in naming objects. So to translate that and understand it for a patient, that actually there's something structurally wrong in your body that is causing this, and in fact what is causing your problems of being unable to speak is from the brain. It may sound like you're just you're just sucking this out of your thumb, but there's no such. So as a person who's an African and understands the African culture and nuances and everything, it tends to help quite a great deal, when I'm then interacting with this patient and then trying to explain these things, because there are things in the language and the culture that one uses to their advantage to make sure that they actually can get the information across to the patient.
Okay. I know you've already mentioned a bit of how you started your journey, but when did you decide that neurosurgery is what you wanted to do? What was that moment?
Simply, mine is so easy to remember and it is vivid, and I can remember as if it was yesterday. I get invited by a mentor, a gentleman who was doing neurosurgery at University of Cape Town, which is where I was doing my undergrad. I went to theatre with him and observed him operating a brain tumor. So I had seen the patient before the patient went to theatre, so I knew what the patient's problems were. They go to theatre, they get operated, and then after this operation, the patient is fine, they're well. It's a complex surgery of opening the skull and exposing the brain. And then you have a fully functional person immediately, within days afterwards. And this is a very drastic improvement that I saw on the patient. So that excited me a great deal, that one can achieve that and actually serve a patient in that manner. I thought there should be nothing better in medicine. That was my thought, and then that's why I then decided to go for neurosurgery.
I imagine many people would actually, after seeing that whole procedure, they'll probably say, no, this is not what I wanted to do. But simply put, you cut people open. What keeps you sane and stable while at it?
My job is like any other. It's like any other.
It's not.
I just happen to open heads and open spines. Look, I was surgically inclined, I guess, as a student as well, so none of it made me cringe. So quite honestly, I don't overthink and obsess about how different it is from other things. Of course, I feel quite privileged, to be able to care for persons, for human beings, and make them feel better, and be trusted by them to make them feel better. That is a privilege that I don't take lightly. But the practice on its own, the practice of neurosurgery, for me is like going into the office like any other person, so it is not very different from any other job. So yeah.
Wow, the way you say it's a job like any other. Say I cut heads, I cut spines. But with the fact that you're also a pediatric surgeon, what's the most challenging part of your work? Are there good moments, heartwarming moments in your work?
Many heartwarming moments. There are many heartwarming moments. The job is challenging. You meet in the context of operating on children. You meet a parent. I'm also a parent. I've got 3 small children, and you meet a parent who is distraught and devastated by the news, for example, of their child having a brain tumor. There are times, of course, unfortunately, when there is nothing that can be done and the condition is terminal, and you have to take that hard conversation, ahead with the patient and with their patient relatives and the family. Those are moments that happen in between, and it's just basically part of the trade. But in the most, children are very rewarding to treat. They bounce back, they punch back, when you do something to assist them. So they help you along, I usually say to some colleagues that, one of the most important things about a child is that when you're operating on them, you just need to keep them alive during the operation. If you manage to keep them alive during the operation, you've conquered a majority of the challenge. And then after that, you then let them play and let their brains recover and let their brains reconnect and wake up other cells that are no longer, that are dormant and that are now needed, So interestingly, I had a patient recently who had a condition that we call hydrocephalus, which is basically loss of water in the brain. And they had a drain in, but it was no longer working. It sometimes blocks. So when that happens, the patient can stop breathing. And the patient was in another hospital where there's no neurosurgeon. And I was interacting with a pediatric colleague and telling her, look, this is what we need to do, because even if you're going to airlift that child, she's not going to make it, if we don't do ABC. And I took her over the phone, calmly about what to do. They did what they needed to do. The child arrived to us. The child is now well and at home. So it's, there are many moments. It's peppered with moments of greatness and just pure exhilaration and joy at achieving something for a patient.
Wow. You're a mom, I'm a mom, and I think for many people, many times when a child is sick, there's this wish as a parent for you to just wish that, you could just take that illness out of your child and then put it on yourself, so that if anything happens, it's you to deal with it. If you've spoken about the happy, the warming moments, is there a moment where you probably found yourself? I know you say that one of your first goals is to make sure you keep the child alive during the procedure. Are there moments when you walk out of that room and you have to give a parent bad news? Do you remember any such moment?
Yeah, that is definitely something that happens, in the overall with neuro, fortunately for us, we don't have the dramatic things that you see on TV about, so it's a surgeon coming out of theater who, with, the patient no longer being alive. Those are very few and far in between. In fact, in my entire time in neurosurgery training and specialists as combined, I've only experienced that once. Our patients, tend to come out with us to ICU. What usually is devastating is sometimes when you then come across the histology, or when you've taken the tumor now to the lab and the lab tells you what it is, and then you realize that you've got a malignant tumor, that is, the child is not going to survive for very long. To then have that conversation with the family is very difficult. And look, we are privileged to work with very able colleagues in the allied disciplines, speech therapists, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, dietitians, and orthotists as well. They bring such value to the treatment of the patient that even though sometimes you may come out of theater with a patient who's worse, that with their intervention in rehabilitation, the patient is going to get there and is going to get fairly decent function.
In Africa, many patients only seek modern medicine after using a lot of African traditional medicine. Without undermining the other, in your view, how can the two work together in health?
Just basically starting off by respecting the expertise that are brought by each on the table. And just acknowledging that, a colleague of mine, Dr. and a good friend of mine, Dr. Tlaleng Mufugeng, said once that we must be humble as Western medicine practitioners, in that our patients don't come to us first. They come to us perhaps as a last resort, so that should humble one. And I think that, that was very interesting, that's what she said. And I really look at things that way now, that actually I'm just humbled that you actually thought of me in the line of people that should treat you, And so also the just keeping open lines, and respecting the abilities of one and the other. Also respecting the patient themselves, and their interpretation of their condition. Because things really always revolve around interpretation of what is wrong or what you think is wrong with you. And then many people will then go on and consult, a traditional healer and all of that. And I have patients who do that as well. And even after that, sometimes they consult you and you show them they've got a brain tumor and it needs to be removed. They would rather go to a spiritual person and then see if there can be any spiritual intervention. And I encourage it. I don't, look down on it at all. I just would like to keep open lines of communication between myself and the other treating practitioner on the other side, so that we can both pick up the red flags and pick up deterioration early. Because at the end of the day, it's not about either of our egos. It's about the service to the person who has come seeking help from both of us, and we need to humble ourselves and put that person's best interests at heart and put them first. So that is just generally how I feel and wish that these things can be managed. I'm an African myself, and you would have been taken to a traditional healer yourself as a child or even as an adult, you may choose to. So I have got, it is not a foreign concept to me that people will seek a traditional or a spiritual healer, but we just need to be able to respect each other's expertise and also just keep open lines of communication amongst ourselves.
Amazing.
While there are 460 members of the Association of Future African Neurosurgeons, the number of doctors on the continent who specialize in the field remains staggeringly low, according to scientists. That's all we've got time for this week. If you want to read more about Soseka Mfundisi's experiences, you can head over to our website at www.sidev.net. Today's show was produced by Harrison Lewis and edited by Fiona Broom, with reporting from Halima Athumani. Africa Science Focus is produced by SciDevNet and distributed in association with your local radio station. I'm Michael Kaloki. See you again next week. This program was funded by the Carnegie Corporation of New York.